Hey, how's it going? Let's talk about Brighton and Hove Albion, shall we? Fresh off the back of a 3-1 spanking of Newcastle. Yes, Champions League Newcastle. With a hat-trick from Evan Ferguson, stealing the headlines rightfully. What a fantastic performance from them. In a week where Brighton fans must have to pinch themselves just to make sure that this isn't all a weird dream. Because not only have they just made a statement result like that against Newcastle, they're also looking at the Europa League draw and seeing their name there up in lights in the group stage of the Europa League, which must be incredibly surreal for Brighton fans. What an amazing run they're on at the moment. Finishing brilliant in the league, being touted as a model club by pretty much the whole world. And a result like this only reinforces that belief that Brighton are on the up. And add to that this incredible transfer window they've had where clearly they've sold two of their best players in midfielders, Moises Caicedo and Alexis McAllister. But yeah, that's right. They've also signed, on loan albeit, Ansu Fati from Barcelona, which is an incredible piece of business because he's still a hugely talented and very young player with plenty to prove, but it's also a Barcelona prodigy. And you don't associate the likes of Brighton, no disrespect whatsoever to them, I'm sure their fans would agree, with signing a player like Ansu Fati. So remarkable times for Brighton, and I'm here for it. They absolutely deserve the success they're having for the kind of way they operate as a football club. Anyway, let's stop banging on about the way Brighton run and being patronising. Let's talk about the game against Newcastle. A 3-1 win, thoroughly deserved. But how did they do it? Well, of course, the headlines are going to go to Evan Ferguson, who, after scoring a hat-trick against a team who normally have a pretty good defensive record like Newcastle, will rightly get their headlines. And in doing so, Ferguson becomes only the fourth player to score a hat-trick in the Premier League before his 19th birthday. Well, put simply, Newcastle's defence just gave far too much space and time to Evan Ferguson. Whether they underestimated him, who knows, but for all of his goals, he had all the time and all the space in the world to strike from distance. And blimey, he is so good at striking from distance, isn't he? His physique, his confidence, his swagger, and of course his finishing leaves so much to be admired, and guaranteed next summer there will be teams in for him, sensing a potential world beater on their hands, because right now there's very few teenagers in the same kind of form as he's in and showing the same kind of potential as well. Apart from, of course, Jude Bellingham at Real Madrid. Now, Newcastle obviously made it easy defensively, as we mentioned, but they squandered a lot of chances as well. And Brighton did ride their luck to an extent, but how clinical Ferguson really was the difference between these two teams. And I've got to give more credit to Brighton, really, for how they've handled Ferguson too, because I mean, many clubs wouldn't have given him as much of a chance as he had at Brighton after joining from Bohemians in 2021. But Brighton have put trust in him, and he's absolutely repaid that faith massively. I think this is the start of a real breakout season for him. Last season he showed glimpses of what he can do, but with a decent run in the team and a team that creates goals, creates chances for a player like him, I can only see him scoring a decent amount this season. Who knows how many that might be. But it's not just Ferguson who had a great game this time and is having a great season so far. Billy Gilmour deserves a mention. I think there was a chance he might have been cast into the football wilderness after Graham Potter swapped places with him at Chelsea, because he was very much a Potter type signing, wasn't he? But he played fantastically in this game. He wasn't the only one either. Solly March, I think, can understandably be disappointed not to be in the England squad at all after the seasons he's had so far. He's a great goal scorer and very creative player going forward. I think his age is kind of against him, because I don't think Gareth Southgate will give a debut to a player who's approaching 30, let's face it. But Brighton won't complain, because it means they get to keep him and preserve him and not worry about having to go on international duty, because he's been fantastic for them going forward, hasn't he? And of course, Kaoru Mitoma remains an absolute driving force for the team too. And it'd be really interesting to see how Ansu Fati plays in this team when obviously that left-hand side is locked down by Mitoma, isn't it? He's one of the league's best wingers at the moment, Mitoma. If Fati wants to have that position as his own, he's going to have to be patient, because in front of him he's got a player who is one of the league's best in that particular area. So yeah, interesting times to see Brighton having so much abundance of talent, and how they use that going forward would be absolutely fascinating. But what an incredible performance, what an incredible result against Newcastle. They thoroughly deserve to be flying high where they are at the minute. Interested to see what they and Ferguson and the rest can do in the Premier League and in Europe as well. Let's see what they can bring to the Europa League. It'd be really interesting to see, I think.